I've been looking at this drawing for a little bit, and I realize that, well, there's probably a bunch of mistakes in it. I'm okay with that for now. Um, Always remember that drawing is a process that you have to go through. We can't expect to get things perfect right off the bat. We have to get something down on the paper, and then really the whole drawing process is all about making adjustments and corrections and trying to see more and more correctly what it is that you're looking at. So, one of the best ways I've learned to make these corrections and figure out what needs to be corrected and where to make the correction is through sighting and measuring, making comparative measurements of parts to the whole to get the proportions accurate, and then sighting in angles and lines of alignment to see where things line up with each other and how they should line up with each other. So this is going to be a little difficult for you to see. I've got the picture of Dan over here, and of course a drawing here. I'm going to be reaching out and taking my measurements over here and then translating those into the drawing. Hopefully you'll be able to see enough of what I'm doing to get an idea, but it's one of these things that you can only do from your point of perspective, and so you have to kind of practice it and get used to it on your own as you go. But I will try to explain what I'm doing as I work through this. So for this, one of the first things you want to consider is just the overall length of things. And we talked about this before. We practice a bit of measuring the, using the head of it as a unit of measure, and then using that to compare to other parts and see how close we are in some of the lengths and widths of things. So I'm going to do exactly that. I'm going to measure Dan's head, and I'm going to use that unit of measure to measure some of the other pieces. How wide he is at the shoulders, for example. Probably how wide he is across from the elbow to that little point on his pinky. The length of this leg, the length of that foot, the length of this leg. I don't know, just about anything in there. So let's see if we've got basically just overall height versus width correct or close to correct. To do this, I do have to extend my arm full length, so I've got my elbow locked. And it's really important that I hold my pencil or my measuring tool parallel to the thing I'm looking at. If I start tilting it, then some of my measurements are going to be off, and the translation to the paper is going to be off. So if you think about your drawing as the picture plane, it's that flat two-dimensional surface, then whatever you're looking at, if this was a live model even, I would be thinking that I'm looking at them through a flat two-dimensional surface and trying to make my measurements through that. So point of all that is that this needs to be straight up and down, not tilted towards or away from the model. So top of his head to his chin, and overall height from the top of his head again. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 to just about the ankle. So I come over here, same thing. I'm going to measure what I've done for the head. So I'm going to the very top of his head and to his chin. It's 1, 2, 3, So my drawing's a little short compared to that. I'm hitting my 5th mark down here, and it needs to be hitting here. Typically, well, there's 2 ways to make that correction. One is to lengthen the foot or bring the head up higher, but then I'm not hitting those 2 marks. And I said those 2 marks are true from the get-go. So the other thing to do is to make things smaller within the drawing. So I may have his head a little bit too wide or just a little bit too long already. So for example, if his chin ended more like right here, and I take that measurement, I get a lot closer to what I'm after. That was just adjusting his chin. What is that? Not even really an 1/8 of an inch up. But that 1/8 of an inch times 5, you almost change the whole drawing by an inch if you think about it. So just based on that, I can change the general size and length of his head. So I'm adjusting really my unit of measure. Not adjusting the figure, I'm just saying, okay, if the unit of measure was smaller, things might fit a little better. I might be okay with that. We'll see. Let's try the width. Top of the head to the chin, get my unit of measure again. And then pinky, 2, 3, about 3.5 across this way. So get my unit of measure on the drawing. 1, 2, 3, almost 4 in my drawing. So my drawing's a little too wide. To fix that, I'm not going to make his head bigger again. I'm going to squeeze in from the sides of the drawing. I already feel like, just in general looking at all this, that this hand feels really pretty big, which means this pinky joint right here may be a little too far over. Not sure yet how I feel about this, but for now, if I look and I kind of taper some of this down just a little bit, again, I'm making almost that 1/8 of an inch change. It doesn't take much to make a big change to the drawing. Oftentimes you don't have to move things huge distances. Just small ones will get the job done for you. So again, the new point, 2, 3, 3.5. So that pretty much made that work for me. And tapering that in helped me a little bit because I noticed that this is a bit more of a continuous line through here. So I'm just going to go through a few other quick measurements and check some other things. I'm kind of curious, do I have the base of the pectoral muscles right? Not sure about the length of the neck there, but one of the things that's really jumping out at me is the width of the shoulders. This feels a little narrow, but I'm not sure if it is. And so I'll go back to the source, take that head measurement again. Let's see, I'll go from the base of the deltoid, It's about one head to the center of the chest, and just a bit more than that. So from here to here, and then a little bit more than one more to get to this point. Let's check the drawing. That's one hitting there. Two hitting there. And I have quite a bit extra. So I'm still too wide, actually, at this point. So I look at my drawing and say, where are the places where I can carve away? I already mentioned that this seems like it's a much more continuous line. So if I push in on some of this just a little bit, I end up a little happier. Now this seems odd to me, and maybe it does to you if you were listening to what I said earlier. I felt like the shoulders were too narrow in the drawing compared to him. But for now, I do want to trust in the measurements and the information that they're telling me. Okay. Let's try another measurement. Let's do from the toe to the knee. 1, 2, okay. So what I'm getting is that he's 2 heads, chin to the top of the head. 1, 2, oh, pretty good. So I was getting 2 heads from here to here, basically the base of the kneecap. So that works out pretty good for me. Check, let's see. That's convenient. So what I found is that one head length should be the distance from the belly button to the dip in the clavicle. And I'll show you what I'm talking about as soon as I spot it in here. Okay. So this little dip in the clavicle where your throat has that nice little push in there. It's right at the top of the sternum. A little bit lower, and the belly button's probably just a touch higher, but I was seeing that as one head length difference. So that's going to change how his clavicles move away from there. Give a little more length to his neck. And so far we're pretty good with that. Let me check the length of this. Go back to the head. And 1, 2 to there, okay. One, 2. That's where my second measurement is, and that's pretty much where the change in direction on his foot should be. So again, I'm in okay shape at this point with that. So 1, 2. So it's kind of convenient in a drawing like this one in particular, where a lot of these pieces seem to be fairly closely related to the length of the head. So that unit of measure is working out pretty good for me. Okay. This time I'm measuring from his elbow to the indentation at his armpit. Came up as one head as well. And so I'm seeing maybe I need to move where the pectoral muscle terminates just a little bit lower. Get that accurate. A lot of times I like to use these measurements and compare them to negative spaces as well. So, a bit more than that, a bit more than that. Lowering that down did help me out in the measurement of this negative space as well. There's one head length needed to come in about here. And earlier that would have been where the armpit was. Okay, one last thing is pretty important. The length of the legs of the chair, the cushion, all of that should be compared to the same unit of measure, so everything fits onto there. Okay. I was pretty close with that for that change in direction where that happens. Let's compare this one too. Should be. And about here. All the way across. Excellent. What else could I measure? At some point I need to measure the space between here and here and here and here. So I already know I have a problem there. When I look at my source, the space here is smaller than the space here. And I can already tell that this leg is a little too angled. But measuring the head length and comparing it to that, so that should be over one head length. And in my drawing, it's only one head length, which is the foot probably has to move over a bit more. That's going to work to my advantage because it's going to straighten this leg up a little bit. Let's check the other side. To the ankle. Yeah. Should be hitting the foot somewhere in there. So again, both of those measurements tell me I've got to do some reconstruction. Luckily, I didn't spend a ton of time down here working on this. The other thing that's going to eventually tell me that is when I compare the angle of the central axis of this leg to what I see here, it's probably going to be doing more like this. So luckily, it doesn't mean I need to change the position of the knee. I just need to change the direction of what's happening here and move this stuff more in this area, kind of more straight up and down. More on that to come. I'll check one other thing, maybe two. You literally can't measure and compare enough. What I mean is there's plenty of opportunity to keep exploring this. And so even though I'm doing this measuring thing first, I was just measuring the distance from here to here. Even though I'm doing this first, it's not really the way I would do it. I don't just start with measuring, do that, and then switch to using alignment lines. I switch back and forth constantly between the two. The more different ways I look at this, the more accurate I'm probably going to get. What was the other one I wanted to check? That and that. Okay. That. That. I'm probably going to end up moving this a little bit lower. This kind of intersection of things right here can come down, which is good because I was feeling that leg was a little insignificant, a little too thin to be doing everything it needs to do. All right, so that's a bit of the measuring. We measured overall length. Didn't really have to make an adjustment there. Got lucky. Measured distance across. What's the widest points compared to how tall? Made an adjustment. Measured the width of the shoulders. Made an adjustment. Measured some of these things. The biggest thing that measuring showed me that was off was the position of this foot. Now, I don't want to get into that, changing that now, because there's so much angularity about this. The way I'm going to go about solving where to place that foot is going to be based more on the looking at alignments and angles of things. And that's what I'll get into next.